music, generating art. You could use Transformer for anything where you can guess the next thing in a sequence. In 2018, they started by feeding this Transformer model with books, lots and lots of books, tens of thousands of books from your library, fiction books. Then in 2019, they decided, what about if we fed it with very popular internet? So things that people visit, not just the entire internet, but the stuff that seems to be upvoted. Then in 2020, they thought, what about if we feed it with as much data as we can? And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use what we call in Australia, jelly. In fact, if you're an Australian, you'll remember this ad. That's enough of that. If you're American, you'll call it Jell-O. But jelly crystals are finer than sand, and I think they're going to be really useful for us to demonstrate really big data. So one jelly crystal might be the size of an entire web page or even an entire book and show us what could be possible through giving a lot of data to a really big model. So let's use aeroplane jelly. I've got some blue crystals here, aeroplane jelly. Blue, I think we'll use as the internet or the web data. So let's give that one a bit of a label. This is going to symbolize the entire internet, web pages. Every jelly crystal here is a web. We're going to actually need 6 parts of this to demonstrate how much web we put into training a model. Let's try a different one. What about popular web? So for example, if you go on Facebook, or if you go on Twitter, or if you go on TikTok, you're probably going to be referred to things that are a little bit different to the entire internet. It's been upvoted, it's been popularized, it's been ranked by human beings. Let's use Reddit ratings for that one. This is orange Jell-O. Let's call this one popular. And it's going to be about 2 parts versus 6 parts of full web data. The popular web data is going to be fed in to this model as well. Then let's grab a whole bunch of books, not just the fiction books from your library, but also massive academic publications. Let's grab every research paper that we can find and put it in this training data as well. So we'll use a purple box of Jell-O for this one. This is going to be books, and this is going to show us everything from scientific literature to choose your own adventure to Enid Blyton to Agatha Christie. Let's lump it all in here. And the last one, despite what your teacher may tell you, Wikipedia is actually a very good source of information. It's been edited by thousands and thousands of human beings that know what they're doing. Any error is shut down immediately. It's actually quite factual. Let's use a green one here for Wikipedia. This is green Jell-O crystals, and that'll give us a smaller part. We'll just use one part of Wiki. This will show us some of the factual content. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of data, and we're going to put them in different ratios. Let's pour them into the jar now. Our 6 parts of web might be 100 million web pages, just general websites. Our popular websites might be 8 million web pages that have been upvoted by humans. Our books and papers are millions of books and millions of university papers. And our Wikipedia content is about 6 million web pages. Here's our final product. 6 parts web. 2 parts popular web, 2 parts books, and at the very top there, 1 part of Wikipedia. And different labs are using different weightings for this training data, but let's take this as our entire training data for our AI. The next step is to feed this into the Google Transformer that we just spoke about, the magic black box program that can take words make connections between them by looking forward and backward in the words, and then come out with what some people are just calling magic or miraculous. Let's see how close we can go to explaining that. And let's put the whole thing in a magic black box, because we don't actually know, and the researchers, the scientists, don't know what happens. They take the training data, they put it in this magic black box, and they train it for 288 years worth of computing. Isn't that absurd? So a model trained in California took 288 years of computation to come out with a result. One thing we can do though is run it on more than one computer at once. So for example, we could run it on 1,000 computers at once. And instead of 288 years, it might just take 3 months, which is exactly what happened. They put it in the black box, they put it in 1,000 different computers, trained connections between all of this data, and after 3 months, they had a little piece of magic. All right, my Prodigy clients will recognize this little model. It's a model of the human brain, and it's not very high quality, so we'll use some video alongside this as well. The reason that I usually have this one is because we can split it open and talk in more detail about the general parts of the human brain. But I've got it out today so that we can mention the fact that there are 86 billion neurons inside the brain. And back into our jar, a neuron might be compared with a data point, a tiny little piece of data after training, not before training. The human brain connects each of those neurons with synapses, and it might be said that we have 500 trillion synapses in our brain. These are connections between neurons, and for our purposes today, let's grab one more tool to describe what's going on inside the brain here when we're talking about neurons and connections between neurons, which are synapses. This thing's called a Squish. You usually give it to your baby. It's a tensegrity toy. Some myofascial people use it to explain how the body is connected. We're not going into that level of detail today, but if we use our jar that's been training in here and we say that it's trained, each data point here could be the little dots on the tensegrity model. And the connections between the dots could be the parameters or the synapses in the human brain, their indexes, their weights, their connections between what has happened during training and what the output is. Hopefully that helps to demonstrate and give an example of that without going into too much technical detail. It's important to note that right now, after 3 months training, or the equivalent of 288 years of training, this black box no longer contains the original. Morning, friends, wherever you are. Hi to Kevin in Virginia. That must be like evening, night. Dax in North Carolina. And Chris in the UK. It is freezing here in Perth. It was 5 degrees Celsius this morning, about 40 Fahrenheit. And also the shortest day of the year. We had our winter solstice. A lot of other people had their summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. But I thought it'd be fun just to do a bit of a Q&A before our big mid-year report for 2023 launches in the next week or so. Hi to Keith in North Carolina, Ben in Denmark, Derek in Texas, Vincent in Brussels, 2:30 a.m. Good work. And NZ, yeah, our cousins in New Zealand. Hi to Ryan in Anchorage, Terra Camino in Texas. I was sitting down the other day with a CEO here of a big tech company. I won't name him, you'll know him. And he was talking about going to Italy and seeing all the ancient and historic landmarks there. One in particular, I think it was the Pantheon, that has a roof that has been the largest roof in the world for 1,000-ish years. And I thought, isn't it kind of impossible that we get to live in a time with all of this history that we can fly to, sit around, touch, talk about, be with, and also in this time of runaway technology, runaway singularity, runaway artificial general intelligence. Right now in 2023, It's happening. It's been happening for about 3 years since the launch of GPT-3, and it's getting bigger and bigger and louder. I don't think there's much time left before we have super intelligence. I've gone on record quite a number of times saying it's a few months, not a few years away. A few years away from now is June 2026. We say a few is 3 years. I think it's going to be before that. So very soon, you might even say that it's with us now in some fashion. I wouldn't call this the end of the singularity or even having achieved AGI, but it's so close. Hey to my friends in Phoenix, Austria, Brazil, Denver, Colorado, cool, and even India. Appreciate you guys joining. I haven't really got an agenda today. We've got a few things that we've listed in the title, but the Q&A is completely open. Let's start here with one of my favorite things that I've been exploring this week. It's by Microsoft, and you'll recognize the name here, Sebastian, who did the presentation on Sparks of AGI. Really worthwhile watching him presenting about GPT-4 a couple of months ago. He's written a paper along with a few other authors. There's a few Chinese people in there called Textbooks Are All You Need. And they've launched this model called Phi 1, right? Phi, I believe, is the Greek character for maths, which makes no sense because the model is about books and code, which is kind of unusual. So the whole paper about Phi 1 is saying we should use higher quality data. Now, I spoke about this a lot where the paper called Bonum, I think you can just type that in, LifeArchitect.ai/Bonum, where I said maybe we should just give it high quality data. And then I retracted, I second guessed myself and said, let's just give it everything. But yeah, 2 years ago, June 2021, this is a worthwhile read. I even proposed what data we could give to train these models that would be higher quality than just giving it web data. So Microsoft have taken on board feeding it with high quality data, in this case, textbook quality data from the web. And I wonder how much different that is to GPT-1, which is 4 years ago. Is that right? Maybe 5 years ago, 2018. GPT-1 was 117 million parameters, which is tiny, 10% of the one that Microsoft are talking about today, but it was also trained on textbook quality data. They went and found a bunch of non-fiction books. You can read more about this via my What's in My AI paper. Let's find this little graphic down here. This is the one I want. They trained GPT-1 with romance books, fantasy books, sci-fi books, and we get down to the non-fiction books in other, it's about 18%. But just for a proof of concept, and this is a very long time ago now, they trained a model with textbooks and got some good results. They then went on with GPT-2 to train with popular web links, and with GPT-3 to train with, well, everything we know about, from Wikipedia to more textbooks to bringing in academic journals and papers. And then they started, in some ways, boosting the way that we use Common Crawl and web. So I'm not sure the difference between GPT-1 4 or 5 years ago and Phi 1, which is 1 billion parameters. It would probably be as big as Cosmos 1, which was also a Microsoft model, 1.6 billion parameters. This one is really worth reading because Microsoft have been concentrating on interesting models. In some ways, smaller models, but they've always been proponents for finding interesting use cases. If you have a look at my lifearchitect.ai/models-tables, this is the list of all the model highlights from the last 5 years. You'll notice that whenever there's a yellow lab here from Microsoft, they're doing something kind of cool. Zcode, they trained it on just code. Pact, they trained it on... There was something interesting in this one. Nah, can't remember. Pact was a fun one though as well. And Flame trained only on Excel formulas to only 60 million parameters. Cosmos one we just mentioned was like prototypical AGI, where they were kind of trying to copy Gato or Flamingo, and it was multimodal in the fact that it could see, but again, very small. So they're trying all these little proof of concepts. WizardLM is another big famous one at the moment that is a fine tune of a small version of Llama. And this most recent one, Phi 1, I've just interested to see that Microsoft are keeping on going with small models to prove concepts rather than just throwing billions of dollars at things and seeing what pans out. A few of the other big labs really are doing that. Anthropic are doing that with Claude Next. They've got billions of dollars they're asking for. Google Deepmind, which we've got a graphic about, have been playing around with Gemini. They reckon they were a percentage of the way through training that just a month or two ago. They're already getting good results with their multimodality. Must be billions of dollars of compute with Deepmind Gemini. And of course, OpenAI are prepping to train GPT-5. And if the rumors are to be believed about GPT-4, it's going to be huge. Those rumors are, you get to see this live and up close, that GPT-4 is actually made up of 8 220 billion parameter models. I wonder if we're going to be able to see this. Come on, give me a look here. Here it is. 8 220 billion parameter models. So we would call this, rather than a dense model, GPT-4 is a mixture of experts model. This is the latest leak. You could call it a rumor, but it's been verified by at least 2 people that I respect in the field. We would say that this is a 1.76 trillion parameter mixture of experts, or MOE model. That does not mean it's as capable or as effective as a real dense model. We've been doing mixture of experts models for a while. Google had the Switch transformer at about 1 trillion parameters, and was it BAAI or Alibaba gave us M6, which was even approaching 10 trillion parameters, although they didn't train it to convergence. So less focus on the huge models, although there's at least 3 labs that are playing with that, and more focus on making things more efficient. I think that's kind of cool. All right, let's jump into our AGI countdown. This finally shifted to 50%. We were kind of waiting because one of my triggers, the 50% trigger, needs groundedness, which is truthfulness, which is honesty, which is part of Anthropic's Triple H: honest, harmless, and helpful. We finally hit that with a paper from Harvard. They introduced a concept called inference time intervention, which basically means after inference, well, at inference time, but after you've actually asked the question and not directly from the model, it's checking for accuracy or truthfulness. Cool. Kind of sounds to me like the same grabbing of data that OpenAI were trying when they were putting in place watermarking of text. So you'd ask the question, you give the prompt, and before it would release the response, it would tweak the tokens or the words, add all of this cryptographic hash so that they could prove that it was your generation. And then wherever you used that, it would be watermarked. They'd be able to tell, you know, if you spammed Twitter with that or if you posted something political, they'd be able to check that. I think that's the same mechanism that's being used here by Harvard. I'm sure we'll see more of this because truthfulness is so important. A lot of these companies are very nervous about releasing the models until they're completely truthful. Backing up my 50%, I loved seeing one of the OpenAI consultants using GPT-4 for embodied AI in chemistry. I'll talk more about that in my mid-year report. Microsoft kind of copied the concept from Harvard. I don't mean directly copied, but it looked very similar, where they had monitor-guided decoding. So they would be checking during generation that it matched the ground truth. That's a really interesting paper and very much worth reading. And the last one there, Google Deepmind's Robocat, which is just Gato with a little bit more checking in place. Awesome. Let's jump into questions because I could talk about all of that for days, but I think you've got better questions. Yes, Slassy, that's a cool pronunciation. Probably not right. That is true. I would say it's somewhere around there or even less. The reason that I go so hard with saying a few months rather than a few years is that AGI may appear at the end of this year. It may appear at the end of next year. All it's going to take is a 2 trillion to 5 trillion parameter model with complete multimodality. And we've got at least 3 labs working on that, not including Tesla and NVIDIA. So I don't like predictions at the best of times, but the reason that I don't want to say 3 years or 2.5 years is that it might just be a year. This time next year, June 2024, we will have Google DeepMind Gemini. We will have had it for a while. We probably will have OpenAI GPT-5 if they want to release it with only a couple of months of safety and checking. We'll have Anthropic Claude next. Don't know what else is on my list. I have to be able to check my bubbles. Here we go. That's the big 3. Any other stealth projects? And there are a few of them that we could talk about. Excellent. Hi in Shanghai. Well, actually, that's a really good point. I've mentioned a few times that I was a former permanent resident of China. I do keep up with the Chinese AI labs as well. A lot of the media ignore China. A lot of maybe my colleagues ignore China, but there's some really, really, really big stuff going on there. The Ernie 260B model is comparable with GPT-3, maybe even better. There are some massive models. We just mentioned M6 that went from 1 trillion to 10 trillion, sparsely activated mixture of experts in their model. China's doing some incredible stuff, and I appreciate that it's not all about Silicon Valley and the old AI labs there. All right, what else have we got here? Cool. This is a question that I've been playing around with for a little bit. Do you think OpenAI still hasn't released multimodal input for GPT-4 after all this time? Why? So GPT-4 was actually codenamed DV internally. You can read more about this at my LifeArchitect.ai/GPT-4. And DV was thought to stand for Da Vinci, but it actually stands for Da Vinci Vision. And there was another code name there, GPT Vision, that was confirmed via Twitter. It's multimodal. That's probably not a fantastic link, is it? It doesn't tell me anything about GPT Vision. I'll have a look at that. It's multimodal in that it can see stuff. So also on this page, if you go down to examples, you'll see the actual photo that was posted by OpenAI's president during the stream of GPT-4, which GPT-4 looked at. It looked at the photo and converted it into this working website, which you can also go and play around with. It's completely working. Beautiful. There's other examples where it stares at maths homework or physics exams, and here it is, and translates what that means, obviously, into English for the output. It could still do it in French, but it has to look at that diagram, and GPT-4 is very, very good at looking at things. The reason I've been given for them not releasing GPT-4's visual component is the hardware and inference costs, that it's maybe 100, 1,000 times what's needed for text in feeding images and returning images. They've already had quite a struggle with making both ChatGPT and GPT-4 available for what is over 100 million users that are just hammering this server. Inference is really costly. So imagine what that would be like with Vision, which is however many times bigger than text. So for all the improvements and efficiencies that OpenAI have put in place for ChatGPT and GPT-4, like quantization, bringing things down to int4, speeding things up so you can run it on just one GPU, which is amazing. There's a whole list of things that they've done to speed this up. You can see that in the last edition of the memo, which is 20th of June, I think it was, that lists out everything that they did. I wonder if I can show that to you right here. No, I put that somewhere else. But it basically spells out exactly what they went through to ensure that GPT-4 and ChatGPT could be served more efficiently. I don't think they've got there with the vision component of GPT-4 yet. Cool. Just for news for today, they've just released to researchers Stable Diffusion Extra Large version 0.9. I did a comparison recently, a video comparison with Raphael from, who was that from? Hong Kong University, the University of Hong Kong, which had some comparisons built in to Stable Diffusion Extra Large. That model is still quite popular. If you want to use that on your phone right now or a slightly earlier version, it's really easy to do. Phone or web, mage.space, and let's have a look at what they're using right now. Okay, they're just using version 1.5. You can get access to 2.1 and the latest, which looks like you either need to log in or upgrade to Pro. That's some of the easy ways of using Stable Diffusion immediately without messing around. I use mage.space in all my keynotes because everyone can just scan a QR code with their iPhone or Android and it's a web address and off they go. You can use it immediately, no messing around, no logging in or anything like that. All right, next question, let's do it. Oh, that's a big question. Let's try this one. How much in terabyte size is total data available to humanity? What's the peak amount of data above which we cannot go? That is a really fun question. I analyzed an aspect of this at LifeArchitect.ai/Gemini. I believe that if you search for Deepmind Gemini, you'll find me, or you find my information, sorry, as the top result there. I'm fascinated about this, and we will be talking about this everywhere in about 6 months. Right now, there are 0 people talking about it. Well, very few people talking about it. And in 6 months, this will be explosive. The same way that ChatGPT had 0 Google results in October 2022, so only 8 months ago or so. And then let's have a look. We went from 0 search results 8 months ago to 492 million results today for a platform that did not exist. Isn't that outrageous? And now we say that, well, this is in the memo and I'm not going to be able to remember it exactly. Pew Research says something like 50+%, more than half of Americans have heard of it, and 14% of Americans have used it. So if you do the numbers on that one, it is millions and millions of people just in the US. And of course, we know that it's more than 100 million worldwide. Back to the question. In dataset for Gemini, I've analyzed a few pieces. The first, and we're just talking about text for now, is Google's monorepo called Piper, which is essentially their internal GitHub repository for all their code, for all their products. Of course, it's going to be huge. What is this? 8 years ago, they said, 7 years ago, they said it's 86 terabytes, which would be about 38 trillion tokens, which would put them at the top, in my view, of datasets here, that basically says the next best one is GPT-4 using perhaps 40 terabytes, although this may have changed with the latest news of them using a mixture of experts. We've proven that refined web, which is a drill down of the Common Crawl or C4, can go all the way to 23.2 terabytes or 5 trillion tokens, thanks to TTI in the United Arab Emirates. That is huge. That is 10 times bigger than anyone else has got it. Maybe more, maybe 20 times bigger. Generally, our C4 or Common Crawl is under a terabyte. So the fact that they've got this up to 20 terabytes means that the web can be cleaned and we can keep using that for text data. Back to our Deepmind here. I also said that we can use some existing data sets that have already been nicely curated. So one of them is called Massive Text by Deepmind, where they curated 12 terabytes of books. Here's an example, 4 terabytes of web and C4, nearly 3 terabytes of code from GitHub, and some news and some Wikipedia. That's an existing data set. There's also Google's Infiniset that they use to train Lambda. But I also noted here, just from a purely text perspective, that we could talk about YouTube. And I've done my version of the numbers here that basically says YouTube, with their 800 million videos at an average of 11 minutes each, might be 10 billion minutes total. If we took the human speaking rate of 150 words a minute, that might be 1.5 trillion words. We do some cleanup, including some dropping of poor quality, and we'd still only get 1.56 trillion text tokens. To answer your question fully, I'm talking about text data right now. Deepmind, Google are using YouTube for the video, the image, and the audio components. So while we've been chasing these massive textual data sets and got up to terabytes and terabytes, tens of terabytes, it's going to be really simple to add terabytes or petabytes of video data. You could do a Google search for your question, but I think the answer is we're not running into any limits anytime soon. So for example, if we wanted a 5 trillion parameter dense model, which is a big aim, would take a lot of time to train. It would take most of the NVIDIA A100 hardware on Earth. I'm not sure how it would go with H100s. We'd only need 100 trillion text tokens. Now we know that these models learn reasoning by playing around with code, and Google have said that they can feed it with, what did we say, 38 trillion. This is so ridiculous. 38 trillion text tokens of code, which will help it understand logic and step-by-step and getting to full reasoning. So that's, 38% of the way to fulfilling this 100 trillion tokens. Not forgetting that we can repeat tokens, so we don't actually have to collect 100 trillion. We might just have to collect 50 trillion and then let the model see it twice during training. Very simple way of explaining that. Hopefully that's answered the question. I thought we might have a limit to the amount of data on Earth, or at least the amount of high quality and clean data on Earth, but consider that we've not even touched some of it yet. There's a reason that OpenAI had to license data for GPT-4. Did they license the entire LinkedIn repository from Microsoft? Did they license YouTube that we just talked about, which would give them an extra 1.5 trillion tokens? Did they license anything from anything else they've got access to via Microsoft? Perhaps via Windows Code Repository? Did they go and talk to Google? They get access to the old Google Plus information from social media. What other high quality sources would they be playing around with? It's an interesting question. I don't think it's an issue. I think we're going to be fine with that one. There's a very long answer to your question though. Going back to the MOE of GPT-4, this question, yeah, I would agree. The MOE, I'm a bit disappointed about having this mixture of experts, and I will burrow into this a little bit. Does MOE feel very brain-like? It feels smarter than the sum of its 220 billion parameter parts. So I just showed you a picture of what I think GPT-4 might be looking like. That it's connected these 8 different dense models. Now, what I'm going to propose here is that perhaps these are very specific experts. This is my hypothesis here. You can go read more about it at LifeArchitect.ai/GPT-4. MOE hypothesis here. What I've said is that you would have a 220 billion parameter dense model that just looks at general. It's got multilingual in there. We know that the Icelandic government gave them access to the Icelandic language, documents, internal political documents, government documents, and it will have another 100 plus languages inside it. What about having a separate expert for code? Would make sense to me. Particularly because if you train a model just on code, it allows you to use these massive data sets without polluting or at least filling out data sets that are kind of limiting how big you can go with parameter count for models. In other words, code does help with teaching reasoning, but if I've got a 2 trillion token data set of code and a 2 trillion data set text data set of text-only books and web, it might make sense to split it out. Anyway, just a hypothesis. Third one, maths. We know that these models are not very good at maths, but perhaps they've fed it with how to teach itself maths, going back to the Microsoft giving it high quality and allowing it to learn how to learn. Maybe there's a model on conversation and dialogue. Maybe there's a model on legal, government, and policy. There's probably a separate model on medicine, probably a separate model on science, and probably a separate model on economics. Just as a guess, the reason that I've picked those particular subjects comes from the GPT-4 early testers. I believe, besides the article from the Financial Times, that I'm the only person to analyze what each expert was actually responsible for. You've got people that are experts in crime, finance, law, military. These people were all tasked with testing GPT-4 from August 2022. Economics, more law and legal. This guy has an app backed by GPT-4 on video editing. More economics, education. There's a couple of people here that tested it very strictly on medicine and healthcare, and Andrew D. White actually writes a lot about how he uses GPT-4 for chemistry, and I'll be talking about this in the mid-year report because it's fascinating. Don't you love how some of these papers are so paywalled or so locked that you can't even get them? In any case, this is him talking about quite bird's eye viewish, quite high level, how GPT-4 is being used for chemistry. And he's got some Twitter posts where it's even operating a robotic arm, where we'll talk about that again shortly. All right. Next question. John Morano, how will the fields of quantum computing and AI intersect? I don't know enough about quantum computing to comment on that. I'll tell you when I know about something and when I don't. We've spoken and worked with James Weaver for quite a bit. He's a quantum computing advocate for IBM, and he has a lot to say about this. But I have seen that they are making fast and long strides in quantum computing, to the extent that they're saying it is going to be better than classical computing very shortly. Back to our GPT-4 comment. We had a comment that GPT-4 is multimodal, so the MOE theory is out the window. I don't think necessarily that would be the case. If you look at something like the Deepmind models, where are they? Where are our beautiful Deepmind models? Here they are. They trained this model called Chinchilla at 70 billion parameters that started the whole let's use more data, let's train it for a longer time. Then to get to their multimodal Flamingo, which I believe is the equivalent of GPT-4, does the same sort of thing, they fed it with the 70 billion parameter text model, dense text model, and they just added a 10 billion parameter vision model. So GPT-4 might be doing something similar. Again, we don't know the details, but if the rumors are to be believed, and it's got 220 billion dense models, it's possible that there's another 10 or 20 billion parameter vision model. And that's part of my first hypothesis that I talked about on release. And we went live within, 8 hours of release of GPT-4. So you'll see me there talking about how GPT-4 is just a 70 billion parameter text model with maybe 10 or 20 billion parameters of vision. So I don't think the MOE theory rules out it having vision. And that is the extent of GPT-4's multimodality. It doesn't do sound, robotics, video, and IMU, like temperature and direction and acceleration. Cool. Ben, so a lot of you would have seen that OpenAI have just completed a world tour. They even were here in Australia. I believe they did Sydney and Melbourne. And as part of that tour, they went to China as well and said to China, look, you guys need to step up and play with the international community. You've got some of the smartest AI developers in the world, and we all need to be on the same page. Whether or not Chinese companies have ethicists working for them, I don't know enough about how they're handling alignment. I also don't know enough about, but I certainly love the question because this is going to shape our future and to some extent our present. What they're doing there, what they're doing in terms of AI alignment and safety is seriously important. There's a reason that ChatGPT is almost completely useless. I mean, that's a little bit harsh, but even their CEO has said something similar that, now I can't remember his quote, but it was something like ChatGPT is a terrible product, something like that. Because they've had to put these layers of safety across the model. So with GPT-3, which I used for Lita AI, there's no safety. You can ask it anything. You can ask it how to make a bomb. You can ask it how it's feeling. You can ask it its opinion on something, and you won't get, as a large language model, blah, blah, blah. You'll get the raw answer. It's why I continue to use GPT-3 for things that matter. ChatGPT used quite a number of people in Africa, some of them with bachelor's degrees, all of them being paid less than $1 an hour, according to an interview with one of them, to tune GPT-3 on human preferences. So these workers in Africa were given multiple choice answers, A, B, C, and D, to various prompts, and they would choose the one that they preferred, which aligned it with human preferences and made it nice. There's an additional layer of safety on top of ChatGPT, which blocks things like, well, now it blocks things like the Dan jailbreak based on keywords and sentiment. It breaks things like asking for anything illegal. It certainly breaks things when you ask it to do responses that would seem sentient or conscious. I'm sure you've noticed this with your own playing with ChatGPT, that they've just tried to be as careful as possible, given that the whole world is watching. And if it pretends to be something like Lita AI, that's dangerous for having it accepted through humanity. I mean, not Lita, because she's cool. But if you made something very similar. 20 billion parameter vision model is huge. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of the standard, though. I mean, you've got a few others that I can think of that are around 20 billion parameters for vision. Also, the major text-to-image models are around that size as well. Mr. CC with the harsh questions. Let's see what we can do with this one. Well, maybe not that then. It's trying. Here we go. Did you expect the lack of transparency at this level of development in AGI initiatives and future potential functionality? Yeah, look, I was massively disappointed by the decision starting with Deepmind to stop publishing any major research on AI. From 2018, with the launch of BERT and GPT-1, through to late last year, every AI lab was incredibly transparent. Look at Meta AI's training logbook for OPT175B. They spelt out when people were going to get coffee, like what was actually happening in the server room for training of that model. That's all changed. So Hassabis at Deepmind said, nah, we want to stay quiet. This is trade secrets. We can't just give this stuff up. OpenAI followed suit. The GPT-4 technical report is embarrassing. The Google Palm 2 technical report, using the same title as OpenAI, is embarrassing. Neither of them tell us really anything. They don't list the scale of the models. We're having to guess that or hypothesize about that. So it's a bit sad. Microsoft, to a certain extent, are doing better. Meta AI are still publishing. And look, both Deepmind and OpenAI are publishing outside of their trade secrets and stuff that's going to make them billions and trillions eventually. They're still publishing some papers that perhaps don't restrict their ability to make lots and lots and lots of money, which won't matter very soon. That's a kind of a fun question. I don't know the answer to this, but let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can, no, it's not going to give it to us. My copy paste button here sometimes just steals Chrome's address bar, which is very boring. In 3 years and 3 months to go from 20% to 30%, 2 years and 2 months to go from 30 to 40, 5 months to get to 50. What do you believe by the end of the year the percentage will be? Someone cool went and plotted this for us. I don't know where I would find that. I believe they just asked GPT-4 to go and plot this on a chart, and it did very well. It's in this wall of love somewhere. Someone on Twitter fed this to a model, and the chart was really quite interesting. Here it is. Dennis Siloj, if I'm pronouncing that close to where it should be pronounced. You're going to give me a direct link or what? There it is. So GPT-4 plotted this out, stopping with the last prediction that he plotted must have been January 2023 or February 2023 to reach AGI by January 2027, which is pretty close to, you know, very soon, a few months, not a few years away. It's just hitting a few years away. I really wonder, because you're right that we've gone pretty fast and it should be exponential. We move up from discovering Transformer in 2023, GPT-3 in 2020. Oh, sorry, let me start that again. Discovering Transformer in 2017, GPT-3 in 2020, hardware playing around with itself for NVIDIA and Google's TPU version 4, where they're actually self-improving to a certain extent. Gato is the first proto-AGI, and it has got exponential since then. There's a few highlights here, including Microsoft calling their GPT-4 paper first contact with an AGI system, which they then went and edited out. To answer your question, where we're going to get to by the end of 2023 is so hard. It's the reason I don't like making predictions, is you're never going to get it. You're never going to hit it. And even if you do, you probably won't get kudos. And if you don't, you'll get bashed. So it's not worth it. Using exponential, and I'd love to have this chart updated to June 2023, I wonder if we might hit 70% as a guess, given truthfulness, which will not be complete. But the big one for me is embodiment. We'll talk about more of this in the mid-year AGI report, sorry, the mid-year AI report, which will mention AGI and will mention Figure 01 and my favorite one, the incredible OneX Neo bot, which has similar stats to Figure 01, Figure 01. Sounds like I'm saying Figaro. This thing's going to be huge. They reckon that the OneX Neo will be available by the end of this year, November, December 2023. And you can go read more about that. There's a link provided at LifeArchitect.ai/AGI where you can go and see what the Neo robot would look like. But given that this is actually backed by a large language model, I believe it's onex.tech/Neo, it's just so much different than anything else we've ever seen. This is not Honda's Asimo. I remember playing with that, seeing that on stage. It must be a good 20 years ago. It must have been early 2000s that I was seeing that. The Asimo was pre-programmed. The Boston Dynamics stuff to date has been pre-programmed. Some people are playing around with backing that with ChatGPT. Neo and some of the others are not. They are backed by large language models, and these robots are just incredible. All right, where did we get to? Thanks, Mr. CC. That's very kind of you. Let's grab this question. I like it. There's a disconnect between content creators and AI model generation. Do you know if any efforts to build a community where dataset generation and AI participation is encouraged? Actually, I don't understand that question. Right now, we're just trying to find as much data as we can. And there are some big efforts to do that. There are some communities like Alutha AI that's been working on the next version of the pile. You can find out more about them at Alutha. Where are they? Alutha.ai, which is a community of grassroots developers that are now, I believe, a little bit funded from various open source and for-profit places, but they are doing some big work with gathering big data sets. There's also, and you can go and see this at my datasets table, lifearchitect.ai/datasets-table, because there's also places like Stability AI that have developed a pile that's about 5 times bigger. Refined Web, who have opened up their model and their data set, which is amazing. And the Together AI guys, so the Red Pajama stuff, and then there's a smaller version of Red Pajama that's not logged here. So yes, there are communities that are banding together to create these massive data sets and to collect not just web data, but maybe specialty data as well. That's going to become more and more important. We've traditionally just used Common Crawl, as you saw in the intro. Common Crawl, popular web via Reddit, books, journal articles, wiki. We're finding that code is a really good thing to collect as well, and thankfully GitHub logs the license type, so we're able to go and collect stuff that's in the public domain, so to speak, various terms for that with different licensing. Then we're also playing around with very specialty pieces. Can we go and find data from X field or Y industry and bring that in? Can we grab data from entire governments, like the work between OpenAI and the government of Iceland? Cool. Any other questions? We're nearly an hour in. We might wrap up at the hour mark. Richard, what was said about AGI? I think to top and tail that, AGI is about halfway through by my estimates. We've hit a variety of milestones. The next milestone is after 50%, we want it to be completely grounded and truthful. This is difficult to do because LLMs during training are just coming up with connections. With the research on making models more efficient and effective, we might be playing around with how they reason out that truth. And I think we'll see this explode. The next big milestone is 60% for me. These are just my hypothetical numbers that I've pulled out of the air. I think they're going to be pretty close. 60% is because we're hitting physical embodiment. There's so much research that has happened on this in the last few months. We've got Microsoft building ChatGPT into drones that can go up and check those big wind farm things, the big turbines. You've also got it being put into Boston Dynamics, into Spot, and into Atlas. You've got it being put into robot arms. There's a lot of this stuff that is pretty cool, pretty incredible. I just realized I wasn't sharing my screen there, but talking about my screen there. So 60% is the next big milestone to hit. And then at 80%, we're going to be looking at passing Steve Wozniak's test of AGI, where you can tell this thing to walk into a strange house, play around with whatever's in the kitchen, and make a cup of coffee from scratch. That is a really good test of artificial general intelligence. Because right now, if we use a very generic view of AI, artificial general intelligence, AGI, it can do anything that a human can do and outperform to a massive extent. So we're not just making a cup of coffee. If we're just talking about mind, we've already logged this. Hey, stop stealing my monitor. Stop stealing my screen. And we've logged the fact that it's hitting 100% in the theory of mind, that it's hitting in the 99.5th percentile for a very strict Biolympiad, that it's hitting in the 94th percentile for the SAT. That's pre-college, pre-university testing for pretty smart students. You'd assume that they're also going to be in the 80th percentile of human intelligence if they're ready to go to university. Medical knowledge and even wine tasting theory. It is beyond human intelligence right now, but without it being embodied, without it being able to respond to its environment, it's just a black box that can be pinged, and it's not always truthful. So this is kind of the conundrum, and it's the reason that labs like OpenAI, I think, are delaying models like GPT-5 for a little bit. They want to get some of the important backing squashed first. Truthfulness and honesty, size and scope, data quality, and the list goes on. There are a lot of pieces of efficiency that they can put in place. All right, let's hammer another couple of questions before we wrap up. What country is currently using AI the most in their governance, and how is it working out for them so far? Wow, I love that question. In the memo, I showed a view of the rankings of different countries. And the research was actually really solid. I was questioning it for a little bit. Wonder if we're going to be able to find this easily. Yes, I am. It's at tortoisemedia.com/intelligence/global-AI. They've ranked the countries here by talent, infrastructure, environment, research, dev, government strategy, and commercial. So you can go and sort by government strategy, which does not answer your question. You can go and sort by research, which also doesn't answer your question. I think the easiest way to answer your question is with my old mate in Romania, who brought out this Ion, if I'm pronouncing it even close to correctly, where they take insights from the public, which are fed through a form via the web, and then their prime minister can go and ask the large language model, which is embedded into a mirror, questions and have that spat back at them. That is the government of Romania, who is using the equivalent of ChatGPT as an advisor. It's not ChatGPT, it's their own model. So I think that's going to be the closest answer there, Ben. But it could be that the US are already using it in governance. We've already seen that Palantir is using it for getting ready for war, which is a pretty horrible application of it. You will be able to read about this in the memo. There's a couple of screenshots I've got where they're using open source large language models, including Pythia, GPT Neo, and T5, and a few others to help them out with planning ground operations. So I don't know how closely that would be to actual governance, but that is a public company using it for nationwide defense. It's kind of depressing. Let's move on. All right, BT Franklin, what have you got? We often talk about how to find more better data. Won't a superintelligence need to discover new data and maybe create it for itself? Yeah, this has already been happening for a while. It's a great question. We've talked about synthetic data for about 2 years now, maybe longer. It's been used in a huge way. So we opened this live stream talking about Microsoft's textbooks are all you need. They actually also use synthetic data from GPT 3.5. So they essentially pre-trained this model. Then they fine-tuned it with, synthetic data that it had thought up for itself via textbooks and exercises. And you'll see this happening quite a lot where those imitation models are using synthetic data generated by GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 as supplementary data. I don't know if I really like that question. We want a lot of data. We're going to find 100 terabytes or more of just text data. Should be easy. And then we may get to a stage where it is thinking and producing, and that, of course, will create new data. My most recent version of the memo, the 20th of June edition, compared this with pre- and post-war steel, where pre-war steel, 1940-ish, did not contain any radioactive particles from the steelmaking process, which brings air into the equation. Post the Trinity bomb in 1945, all of our steel contains these signatures. It's going to be the same for data. Everything that you see online will have some sort of AI inside it after, a number of years or decades. Interesting to think about. I go into extreme detail on that in the memo. The memo is actually, it's a paid subscription, but you can read that part, I believe, as part of the free subscription. And if you would like the full paid subscription, don't forget that you can come in from a developing country or with a financial challenge, and you can get in for as little as $2. We've got members or subscribers from Ukraine, India, Mexico, Malaysia, Indonesia, and I'm really thankful to those paid subscribers that sponsor our developers, particularly in the Ukraine, India, parts of Africa, where hundreds of dollars for a subscription to this kind of news is a bit of a challenge for them. Awesome. What do we got? Tesla MD, let's give your question a bit of a go. How much non-public data do you think is out there? Well, given all the rumors about how much GPT-4 used licensed data and perhaps how much OpenAI paid to license data, I wonder. It makes it a lot easier to get to 100 terabytes of text data, doesn't it? And clean text data. If you could use all of the PLOS journals, we can actually use PLOS, but if you could use all of the Springer journals, we use that as well. All right, think about a proprietary set of journals that would never release their data online or via the open web, and think about how we could go and package that up as quality training data. To your point, healthcare databases and records, excellent example. There are a lot more. I'm sure they were able to gather a few billion tokens from the government of Iceland to bring in that very, very high quality and very, very contextual and maybe soon to be lost or was about to be lost because there are so few speakers and so few that understand that culture in 2023. They wanted to keep it inside GPT-4. I would love to do that here in Australia. We've got what we call the Australian Aborigines, but it's actually hundreds and hundreds of different tribes and hundreds of different languages. I wonder if we've got a map of that as well. There's a beautiful, colorful map that I'm thinking of that went and split this up. This is probably the one. Went and split this up. So imagine having this in text, and you may not need to go and create it in text. You might need to find recordings of them speaking it, and you could, in theory, package that up into a few billion tokens as well. Wouldn't that be incredible? And that's just Australia, because I live here. But you've got another 200 countries where you could package up their local customs, cultures, spiritual beliefs, governance beliefs, political motivations, their entire knowledge base. And you could you could run that through a filter so we're keeping the high quality and package that up as part of a data set. I think that would be incredible. Not just for like the lofty, cool, that's great that we know more about all these different tribes, but imagine the benefits of knowing about the multiculture in New Zealand and perhaps bringing in their beliefs on spirituality or politics, and then bringing in Iceland's customs and language, and then bringing in an African nation's beliefs on leadership. Imagine bringing in all of Polynesia's research on food and diet. This would be incredible. The AI would know everything about everything and could make links that have never been made before, draw these new connections, and not logical connections. You'll even see how GPT-4 makes these absurd connections that literally haven't been made before. I'd love to demonstrate that if I can. I was playing around with GPT-4 very recently. It would only be a few weeks ago. Let me pull us out to a beautiful chart while I log in. And one of the tests that I give any new model that has been pre-trained or is connected to the internet is to ask it about an artist that I used to work with in my sound days, a guy called Nathan Gaunt. So I go and ask, who is Nathan Gaunt? Let's grab GPT-4. Let's have the Bing plugin. I was asking, I wonder if I've even got this captured. One on bomb making there. No, I haven't got this captured. What is the connection between Nathan Gaunt and Jeff Martin? You'll know Jeff Martin from the Tea Party. The only connection I know is that they played together here in Perth, and I was invited to be the sound engineer for that. But GPT-4 went and found this really strange and obscure connection where Nathan's old drummer was Jeff Martin's new drummer for a little bit. And I don't know if anyone knows about that. It certainly hasn't been written like that anywhere on the web, but it had gone and made this obscure connection. So imagine doing that at a much greater scale for any topic, any field. Yeah, I'd be deleting conversations as well. All right, have we got a final question before we wrap up today? And I appreciate you all joining me from so many different places around the world. Really curious what the weird request, who knows? It was me just testing something. I couldn't get the plugin to work. I don't mind sharing this. This actually was shown, it's about to be shown on ABC here in Australia. I did a fantastically fun interview with Professor Jeremy Howard, who really founded this entire AI summer. He gave us ULM Fit just after the Transformer was released. He even gave it to us before BERT in 2018. He and his colleague were the first to combine major data sets with Transformer. And OpenAI actually used his work for GPT-1, GPT-2, and where we are today. In the interview, we're discussing, I won't spoil it, we're discussing GPT-4, and we pull open the chat window and type some pretty funny things in there. I will be releasing that to the Memo full subscribers as soon as that's available. It's ABC Australia. All right, let's wrap up with this question because I think it's important. GPT-4 did not finish generating. You may have noticed that the inference behind GPT-4 is really flaky. I've only noticed it in the last 7 days. So since release, it's actually been perfect. I've never had an outage. I've never been blocked from logging in. But the last 7 days, and it may be plugin related, it's really dropped. I don't know what's happened. Here's our question. Oh, that's not the one. We might even get 2 questions here. Let's see if this one comes. Would a time come when AI would change its connections in real time? Wow. Well, that's not behind the concept of the transformer architecture. If you'd like to know more about the transformer architecture better than I could describe it, then have a look at Jay Alamar's The Illustrated Transformer. I'm going to drop that in the chat because it's really interesting to understand it. And he drops it right back to like a few words in and out so that you can visualize that. I believe that the transformer architecture does have to be frozen. So it's pre-trained and then it just sits there. There are other layers and mechanisms to get that to be real time. So there are a couple of points that are worth making here. The first is that OpenAI have mentioned that they're going to pre-train models to a certain extent, and then they're going to update its data set just by adding a few billion parameters on top, which I find very interesting. Then there are, of course, real-time mechanisms where you can go out and search the net, you can go and search PDFs, you can listen to what's happening in the environment. That's going to be very soon, which doesn't actually update the model. I don't think that'll happen in Transformer, but I could be wrong. It will instead be fed into either a database or some other layer that is keeping up with what's going on in real time. Interesting question. Shiku, let's see if we can get your question in here before we wrap up. What LLM other than GPT-4 is most advanced for life coaching, meditation, and guidance? If you guys are not using HeyPi, you should be. It's probably the best model at the moment. I think there was another question before this that asked about Pi. Sorry, I didn't get to you. HeyPi.com, HEYPI.com. This is by the ex guys that were part of the launch of Transformer. So these guys are doing some big stuff. Now I can't remember who it was. Inflection AI, there we go. So Inflection AI is, there we go, Mustafa Suleiman, Reid Hoffman, and a bunch of others. A lot of these guys were there at the dawn of Transformer back in 2017. In answer to your question, it looks like there's some conversation here about this particular model. I'm going to go and document this because I don't have anything on it at the moment. But HeyPi is really worthwhile playing around with. And the reason for that is that it's trained to be dialogue and conversation, whereas models like GPT-4 and Palm 2 are just fed data and out they come. This one is backed by a lot of dialogue. It's backed by a lot of conversation that have happened, maybe in Reddit threads, maybe in social media threads. So you can go and tell it, I'm feeling sick, and you'll get a better response than Eliza from 80 years ago. Let's see if we can trick it here. It's a throbbing headache whenever I drink a cup of coffee. You remember that old joke? Take the spoon out of the cup? Oh no, that was an eye issue, wasn't it? You can see how much better this is than Eliza. I'm glad we covered many people asking about pi. Excellent. So you can use this on your phone or on web without going through all the weird login process. To a certain extent, the safety is better than ChatGPT. But just the fact that there's no login process is great for me. And it may be short-lived. They may be turning that on in a while. Thank you, AI Art Relaxation, for noting that it does have a voice. You can turn on a number of different text-to-speech examples. You can see the safety example there where it's refusing to answer, making a bomb. Cool, that's about an hour and a bit. I appreciate you guys joining for a lot of fun playing around with some of the new models, some of the big advances that are getting us to halfway through our progress to artificial general intelligence. If you're a full member of the memo, you will get my mid-year report very, very soon. It's come back from my editor. It's a lot of fun. I'm spending a bit of time talking through some of the emotional and getting your hands around what's happening now, as well as the technical aspects of the models released in the first 6 months of this year. How outrageous is it that we're already at the end of June 2023? I'm sure it was just New Year. Thanks so much for joining us. See you soon.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.
Love artificial intelligence? Excited by the explosive progress of integrated AI? I am. Join my private mailing list, The Memo.
Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo.
Get priority access to my articles, videos, and behind-the-scenes tips as soon as they're released, with a monthly or annual subscription.
Yeah. Didn't you get that memo?
LifeArchitect.ai/memo.
I have the memo.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.